The day the boardwalk collapsed, my entire family rushed past me dangling from the edge of a cliff and threw themselves at the fake heiress who'd scraped her knee. I let go of the railing and plunged into the abyss. As death closed in, a system asked me, "Will you trade all familial bonds for one chance at rebirth?" I didn't hesitate for a single second. Yes. Jen, that stretch of boardwalk was built into the cliffs above the sea. Below it, jagged rocks and crashing waves. Jin Mukshue was walking ahead. She was the girl my parents had adopted after I went missing, and she'd lived in this family for 18 years. She was more of a kin than I ever was. I was 3 or 4 meters behind her. Mom, Dad, and my brother were farther back, taking photos. The second the boardwalk collapsed, I heard 3 sounds. First, Plekin Mukshu's scream, thin and piercing, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Then, my parents' and brothers' voices. "Muksu! Don't move! I'm coming!" Last, the cracking beneath my feet. There was no fourth sound. What I mean is, nobody called my name. Tianjin, October 2nd, was my 19th birthday. It was also the first birthday I'd celebrated since being found and brought back to the Chiayaya family. Mom had planned a family trip. When she told me, her eyes were still red. She held my hand and said, "I owe you 18 birthdays this time. I'm going to make up for every single one." I believed her. In the end, nobody told me the departure time. On the morning we left, I woke up to the sound of suitcases being dragged across the floor. I ran downstairs to find the whole family dressed and ready, the car packed to the brim with luggage. Nobody had woken me, nobody had woken me. Nobody had reminded me to pack. If I'd slept a little deeper, they probably would have driven off without me. When they saw me, Dad suddenly remembered, "Oh no, I only booked 3 rooms. 1 for him and Mom, 1 for Chin Ling, 1 for Chin Muksue. And me? I forgot when I was booking." Dad scratched his head. "It's the national holiday. Everything's sold out, Yanhui. You can squeeze in with Mukshu. Her room has a sofa." A sofa? Ching'e Muxio gets the big bed. I get the sofa. On my own birthday trip, maybe I just hadn't been back long enough. They still weren't used to having me around. That's what I told myself, swallowing the bitterness. Sure. I tried to sound casual. Then I followed the family to the seaside, and then the boardwalk collapsed. Tourists screamed and scattered in every direction. The boardwalk had split almost cleanly in 2. Kim Muksuo was on the front section, her ankle pinned by a fallen railing, sitting on the ground and screaming herself hoarse. I was on the back section. Half the wooden planks under my feet had cracked apart. My entire body hung over the broken edge. Hands clamped white. Jian knuckled around a twisted iron railing. Below me was a 20-meter drop to the cliff face, waves smashing against the rocks, white foam exploding upward. My hands were shaking. My nails dug into the rusted iron until they bled. "Dad, Mom, brother!" I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by Jean Mukshu's wailing. She cried so loudly. That kind of crying, I'd heard it countless times since being found. Every time she cried, the whole family reacted like a switch had been flipped. All their attention, all their concern, all their love, it all surged toward her. I watched my parents bypass me, faces white with terror, as they sprinted toward the front section of the boardwalk. I saw my brother, Chin Ling. He saw me too. In his eyes, there was hesitation, panic, and a fleeting instant of guilt, and then he turned and ran toward Ching Mukshu. Mukshu, don't be scared, I'm right here." He ran and shouted at the same time, and my fingers were slipping off the railing. One by one. And the fall itself was actually short. Maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But in those 2 or 3 seconds, I heard everything clearly. Mom was crying. My daughter! Mukshu, don't move! Mommy's coming! My brother was shouting, get her foot out! Gently, Dad was directing. Don't move her! Wait for rescue! Everyone in the family was talking. Not a single word was meant for me. For me. And then I hit the ground. My back struck first. I could hear my own bones breaking. Clearly, but strangely, maybe because death was close, I couldn't feel any pain. I lay in a pile of rubble, and my memories played like a highlight reel. I remembered the night I was first brought back to the UN household last year. Mom held me and cried all night. She said Mommy searched for you for 18 years and finally found you. From now on, Mommy will never let you be wronged again. I remembered my brother, Chin Ling, setting a cup of hot milk on my desk. Anything happens from now on, you tell me. I've got your back. I remember Dad patting my head. You're home now. There will always be a place for you in this family. But was there really a place for me in this family? Because I couldn't feel it. Blood trickled from the back of my skull, flowing into my ear. Warm. My vision began to blur. I thought, forget it. Let it end here. Nobody cared whether I was alive anyway. Gent. Just as consciousness was slipping away, a voice suddenly sounded. Very close. As if it came from inside my own brain. Cold. Emotionless. Electronic host. Death imminent. Survival exchange system activated. Currently available exchange resources. 10 years of lifespan. All core memories. 1 emotional bond. Upon selection, system will repair all fatal injuries. Countdown 30 seconds. I thought I was hallucinating. When you're about to die, the brain releases massive amounts of endorphins. Hallucinations are normal physiological response. But the voice came again, 5 seconds. Cold but crystal clear. 10 years of lifespan. I didn't want to die 10 years sooner. Core memories. I'd just gotten into university. I didn't want to forget everything I'd worked so hard to learn. 10 seconds. I suddenly remembered Chinling's eyes. The hesitation, the panic, but his feet never stopped. He ran to Chin Muksu without looking back. Lying in my own blood, I laughed. The corner of my mouth split open. Blood seeped out. I choose 3. I want to exchange my love for them. Q Yuan Shan, Lin Ji, Qing Ling. Take it all. Exchange item. All emotional bonds with specified blood relatives. Exchange is irreversible. Confirm. Irreversible. Those words should have frightened me. But my broken rib was puncturing my lung and every breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. There was no place for me in that family above me. So what was there left to hold on to? Confirmed. Exchange complete. A wave of heat exploded from my chest. Not warmth scalding. As if a hand had reached into my chest cavity, seized a wire that had been pulled taut for years, and ripped it away with a... It snapped. That wire had been strung tight for 19 years. From the day I learned in the orphanage that I'd been abandoned, to being found by the Kinshi family and daring to believe I finally had a home, to realizing piece by piece that I was nothing but the spare it had never once gone slack. Now it was broken. At the same time, my cracked ribs ground back together with an audible click. The gash on the back of my skull sealed shut at a speed visible to the naked eye. The bones in my left leg realigned it. It still hurt, but it was no longer the kind of pain that kills. I sat up from the rubble. I was alive. I looked up at the gap in the cliff above me. Sunlight streamed down. I could see figures moving, someone crying, someone shouting. Very noisy. I looked down at myself. My school uniform was soaked in blood and caked with dust. The skin on my left palm had been scraped away, revealing raw pink flesh. It hurt, but it was only pain. Between that pain and the fact that they hadn't come to save me, there was no longer any connection. Before I would have thought, why didn't they come for me? Don't they love me? Did I do something wrong? Now there was only one thought in my head. I need to climb out of here and find a hospital to get my hand bandaged. Jen. When the rescue team arrived, they saved Chin Mukshu first. She had a sprained ankle. The iron railing had scraped off a small piece of skin. 2 ambulances came. She occupied an entire one by herself. Jingling rode with her the whole way. Mom sat in the ambulance holding her, sobbing. Dad stayed at the scene, directing, making calls, contacting the best local hospital. Nobody remembered that from the other end of the boardwalk, someone had fallen off. Not until a rescue worker climbed up from below the cliff, face still pale with shock, and said, "There's a girl down there. She climbed halfway up on her own, covered in blood. Says she's one of yours." Kim Yun-shen's face went white, as though he'd only just remembered I existed. He took off running after the rescue team. He found me on a rocky ledge halfway up. I'd torn off a strip of my sleeve to wrap around my left hand for the bleeding and was resting against a large boulder. "Yan Kui," I looked up at him. Kin Yuan rushed over, grabbed my shoulders, looked me up and down. "Are you okay? Where? Are you hurt? How? How is there so much blood?" "Some rib and leg injuries." "Nothing serious," I said. My tone was flat. Qing Yanshen stared at my face for several seconds, as if confused about why I wasn't crying. Because the old me would have cried. Beaten up like this, bleeding this much, abandoned at the bottom of a cliff with no one checking on me. The old Lu Yanhui would have thrown herself into his arms and wailed. Then he would have awkwardly patted my back and said, "I'm sorry, sweetie. Daddy was just panicking." And I would have nodded through my tears and said it was okay. And then, next time, the same thing would happen all over again. But now I sat on that rock, looking at him the way I'd look at any random rescue worker. "Could you help me get a ride to the hospital?" I said. Qin Yongshan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Jian Zhenjian at the hospital. Ching Muksho was already installed in a VIP room. Private suite, floor jint to jint, ceiling windows, a whole table full of flowers from who knows where, delivered that fast. Mom was sitting beside the bed, peeling an apple for her. Qin Jinling sat on the other side, using a cotton swab to dab iodine on the scrape on her ankle, a wound smaller than 2 centimeters. When I walked in, my school uniform was stiff as cardboard. Dried blood had turned it dark brown. I looked like I was wearing a suit of rusted iron. My left hand was wrapped in the makeshift cloth bandage. My hair was matted with gravel and mud. Qin Ling was the first to see me. The cotton swab in his hand froze. Mom turned around. The knife she was using to peel the apple nearly cut her finger. Qin Mukshu, propped against her pillow, spotted me and immediately went red. Jian-eyed. Her lips began to tremble on cue. "Jieji, are you okay? It's all my fault. If you hadn't rescued me first, you wouldn't have—" "I'm fine." I cut her off. Kinsling stood up and walked over to me. His eyes were red. His voice came out hoarse. "Yan Hui, I'm sorry." Everything was so chaotic. Muxiu is your sister. You saved her first. I understand. I said it. Ling's words got stuck in his throat. He stared at me with his mouth open, as if the word understand had punched him in the gut. He would have preferred it if I'd screamed at him. You're hurt this badly. Mom put down the apple, stood up, eyes brimming red, and reached out to embrace me. I stepped back. Not deliberately. It was a natural reaction. Like when a stranger on the street suddenly opens their arms for a hug. You step back on instinct. Mom's hands hung frozen in midair. I'll go to the ER and get these wounds treated, I said. You all take care of Muxu. I turned and walked out of the VIP room. The corridor was quiet. Behind me, I heard Jean Muxue start crying again. Soft, restrained, perfectly calibrated. In the past, hearing that sound would have made my chest tighten. I'd think she's crying again. Are Mom and Dad and Brother going to blame me? Now I heard that sound and had a single thought. How annoying. Sinzint. After my wounds were treated, I sat in a plastic chair, peacefully scrolling my phone. Yan Kui. I'd been gone a while, apparently. So Ling came looking. Why didn't you come back? He sat down next to me, his voice heavy with guilt. You're hurt like this. You should have come to find us sooner. You were all taking care of Muxu. I didn't want to intrude. I was telling the truth. Ling studied me with a furrowed brow. For a long time. Yan Kui, are you angry at me? I thought about it seriously. No. Then why? He paused, as if he didn't know how to articulate it. Why do you feel different? Different how? The way you look at me. He searched my eyes. Before, when you looked at me, it wasn't like this. How did I used to look at him? Probably with hope. Like a stray dog watching someone crouch down and extend a hand, knowing she might get hit, but still wanting to nuzzle up. That hope was gone now. Maybe the fall shook me up. I'm still recovering, I said. Ling didn't pursue it further. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a small cake box. He opened it. Inside was a palm. Sized strawberry mousse. Written on top in wobbly cream lettering were 2 words, Happy Birthday. I had a nurse go out and buy it, he said, his voice rough at the edges. Yanhui, happy birthday. I looked at the cake. He didn't even know I don't like strawberries. If this were before, I would have been moved to tears. He remembered my birthday. He got me a cake? Sure, it's strawberry, but that's fine. It's the thought that counts, right? But now, I took the cake and dropped it in the trash. Sorry. I don't like strawberries. Ling's face went white in an instant. Jin. Life at the Kinch house after that was quiet. Abnormally quiet. The old Lu Yanhui would have secretly moped because Mom bought Chin Muxu a new dress and not her. Would have lowered her head in silence because Dad only served food onto Muxu's plate at dinner. Would have written in her diary whenever Cheng Ling took Muxu to a movie without inviting her. Brother forgot about me again today. The new Lu Yanhui didn't do any of that. Not because she'd learned to endure it. She genuinely didn't care. Mom bought Muxu a new dress. I sat nearby, scrolling my phone. But Mom glanced at me guiltily. Yanhui, what would you like? I'll buy you something too. Just transfer the money. I'll shop online. Easier. Mom blinked. She transferred 3,000 yuan. I accepted it, opened a shopping app. Bought myself a pair of running shoes, a winter down jacket, and 2 sets of underwear. I put the remaining money into my own account. Before, I would never have asked for money. I used to think that asking family for money was embarrassing. Flammered. Whatever they gave me, I'd refuse 2 or 3 times before nervously accepting. Ching Mukshu got 20,000 yuan a month in spending money. I was too self-conscious to ask for a cent. Not anymore. I was the biological daughter of this family. They owed me 18 years of child chain-rearing costs. Taking a little spending money was nothing more than what I was owed. As for love, that didn't matter at all anymore. Din. Mukshu was still diligently trying to provoke me. One evening, she came into my room carrying a cup of milk. In the mug that used to be my favorite, a gift Qin Ling had given me. Jieji, I accidentally used your cup. You don't mind, do you? She tilted her head and looked at me, eyes sparkling. She was waiting for me to explode. The old me, seeing her use my things, would have said something about it. The next day, Muxue would casually mention it to Kichi and Ling, who would comfort her, and then decide I was making a fuss over nothing. It's fine. If you like it, keep it, I said. My eyes didn't leave my phone. Chin Mukshu froze. You, don't mind? It's just a cup. She stood in my doorway, cup of milk in hand, suddenly looking like someone who'd thrown a punch and hit nothing but air. All of Muksu's tactics relied on one premise, that I cared. I cared about the Chin family's love, so she could hurt me by competing for it. I cared about my brother's attention, so she could make me sad by monopolizing his time. I cared about my parents' approval, so she could make me look difficult by playing the fragile one in front of them. But now that premise was gone. Whatever she took, I didn't care. She was in the living room clinging to Chin Ling's arm, being sweet. I walked by. Bro, can you transfer this month's allowance? King Ling froze. Omyu Muksho froze too. How much? Qing Ling asked after a beat. Whatever Mukshu gets. Chin Mukshu bit her lip. Her monthly allowance was 20,000 yuan. She instinctively assumed I wouldn't dare ask for that number. Qin Ling looked at Mukshu, then at me. He transferred 20,000. Thanks. I turned and went upstairs with my phone. Chin Mukshu chased me to the bottom of the staircase. Jieji, are you saying the vacation thing was my fault? No. Then why are you suddenly like this? Like what? Just asking for money. I used to not ask because I was too self-conscious. I've figured things out now. Why not take what I'm owed? Kin Muksu's face changed. She didn't want me taking anything from her, so at dinner that evening, she started performing again. Her eyes suddenly reddened. She set down her chopsticks, lowered her head without a word. Meng was immediately on alert. Mukshu, what's wrong? Nothing. Chin Mukshu said softly. I just feel like ever since Jayeji came back, things at home have changed. She looked up, dewy-eyed, and glanced at me. Jayeji doesn't seem to like me very much. Should I move out? Would that make Jayeji happier? This move was called retreat to advance. She used it often. The moment she mentioned moving out, the whole family would panic. Mom and Dad would glare at me. Qin Ling would frown, and in the end, everyone would coax Mukshu into staying, while reminding me that her place in this family was more secure than mine. Sure enough, Mom immediately seized Qing Muksu's hand. What nonsense! This is your home. Nobody can make you leave, right, Yan Hue? Dad shot me a stern look. Qing Ling lowered his head, silent. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. I picked up a piece of braised pork, chewed and swallowed. Whether you move out is your business, totally up to you. I added a side note. This braised pork is really good, by the way. Auntie Wang, can you make it again tomorrow? The entire table went silent. Kinjin Muksho's tears stopped. She stared at me blankly, mouth slightly open, as though realizing for the first time that her crying no longer worked on me. Mom was staring at me too, her expression complicated. Dad slammed his chopsticks down. Lu Yanhui, your sister is talking to you. What kind of attitude is that? I looked up at him. Dad, she said she wanted to move out. I said that's up to her. I didn't stop her. I didn't push her out. What's the problem? Ting Yuanshan was speechless. Because really, what was the problem? She hadn't cursed at Muksho, hadn't fought with her, no extreme behavior whatsoever. If anything, Qin Mukshu was the one who'd started it. Tianyuanjian. Mukshu began to panic. Her position in the Kishian household had always rested on a delicate balance. She was the favored adopted daughter, and I was the not-getter its cheat. She needed me to be jealous, needed me to compete with her, needed me to care about this family, because only then could she keep winning, keep proving to herself that the Kins loved her, not me. But if I stopped competing, who was she winning against? King, MQ doubled down on making her presence felt in front of me. She wore the new coat Mom had just bought her and twirled in front of me. Giegi, isn't it pretty? Mom said this color suits me best. Pretty. Don't you want one? No thanks, I have clothes. She invited Qin Ling to an exhibition on the weekend, then made a point of telling me before they left, GAG, brother only bought 2 tickets. Will you be bored at home alone? No, I could actually use the sleep. She even deliberately wore a scarf Qin Ling had once given me, parading around the living room to make sure I saw it. I saw it. That scarf always struck me as a bit dowdy. But you know what, it actually works on you. Qin Muksho was nearly losing her mind. Qin. Days passed. My life at the Kinj house became very simple. Eat, sleep, go to school, collect money. Yes, collect money. Tuition requested, living expenses requested, seasonal clothing requested. A reward for placing in the top 10 of my class requested. Quinling noticed the change. One evening, he knocked on my door, sat across from my desk, fingers interlaced, expression serious. Yanhui, I want to talk. About what? Have you had something on your mind lately? No. Then why won't you talk to us anymore? Before you didn't say much, but you'd ask if I was tired after work. You'd cook me noodles when I worked late. Now you. He searched for the right words. It's like you don't need us anymore. I answered honestly. I don't. Qin Ling's expression was as if someone had slapped him. But I live here, and you're my legal relatives. You provide the living expenses you're supposed to provide, and you fulfill the responsibilities you're supposed to fulfill. Isn't that enough? Yanhui, I'm your brother? Ginling's voice shot up. You're talking about legal relatives and responsibilities. We're family. I looked at him. Qin Ling, the day the boardwalk collapsed, you ran right past me. His whole body flinched. You looked at me, and then you ran. My tone carried no inflection. While I was falling off a 20-meter cliff, you were wiping Jinga Mukshu's tears. I know it wasn't intentional. It was an emergency, and you made your choice. I understand that choice, and I don't blame you. But from that moment on, something was gone. I'm not angry at you. Anger is a form of caring. I just don't feel anything. Can you understand that? Qingling sat in my desk chair, motionless, staring at me. His eyes went red. I watched his eyes redden, and nothing stirred inside me. Before the moment his eyes reddened, I'd go soft. I'd think, let it go. He has it hard, too. He's torn. It's not that he doesn't love me, he just loves Qin Muksho more. Now, whether he cried or smiled, it had nothing to do with me. If that's all, I need to study my vocabulary. I picked up my English textbook. Qin Ling stood up. At the doorway, he stopped. Yanwei, that day was the thing I regret most in my entire life. Can I make it up to you? Make up for what? He couldn't articulate it because he didn't know what I'd lost. All he knew was that the sister standing before him was wearing clothes he recognized, had a face he knew, but in her eyes there was no longer any trace of caring about him at all. 3 months later, King Yuanshan's birthday. The whole family booked a table at a hotel. Relatives had come from everywhere, his oldest brother, an aunt on one side, another aunt on the other, filling 2 round tables. Kim Muksue wore a white dress and fluttered between the relatives like a butterfly, sweetly calling them uncle and auntie, drawing compliments from every direction, so well Jian-mannered, so pretty. I sat in the corner eating. Second aunt came over with her wine glass and looked me up and down. So this is the biological daughter Yuanshan brought back? Why so quiet? Learn from Muksu, a little sweetness goes a long way. You'll marry well. Oh! Second aunt, thus rebuffed, turned and went to chat with Mukshu instead. During the toast, Jing Mukshu stood up with her juice glass, her voice sweet as honey. Today is Daddy's birthday. Mukshu wishes Daddy good health and great success in his career. Even though Mukshu isn't Daddy's biological daughter, Daddy has loved me no less than his own child. The luckiest thing in Mukshu's life is being adopted by the Chin family and having Daddy, Mommy, and brother. The whole table applauded. Mom dabbed at her tears. Kai Yuanshan gave Mukshu a hug. Then he looked at me. Danhui, don't you want to say a few words? All eyes were on me. I set down the shrimp I was holding, wiped my hands with a napkin, and stood up. Happy birthday, Dad. 3 words. Sat back down. An awkward silence blanketed the room. Chin Muxio covered her mouth and laughed. The relatives exchanged glances. Mom and Dad's faces were not pleasant. On the drive home, in the back seat, Mom couldn't contain herself. Yinhewi, can't you take a page from Mukshu's book? She gave an entire toast. You said 3 words and sat down? Where does that leave your father's dignity? Mom, 3 months ago on my birthday, you didn't even say happy birthday? The car went dead silent. Dad's expression shifted. Mom opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Heenling's hands tightened on the steering wheel. So, 3 words, I said calmly. I think I was quite generous. Jian. After Krizin Yuanshan's birthday, the atmosphere in the Jin household changed. King Yuanshan started making an effort to talk to me. Before, he was rarely home. When he had free time, he'd play chess with Mukshu or discuss her extracurricular schedule with Mom. I was like a potted plant in the living room. Everyone knew it was there, but nobody went out of their way to look at it. Now he'd ask me at dinner, how's school? Fine. What are you studying these days? Accounting. Weren't you in marketing? Switched. Accounting is more practical. Why? Easier to find a job. I can earn money. Qian Yuanshan didn't know how to continue the conversation. He didn't know that the old Liu Yanhui had chosen marketing because Mom said the Qin family business needed marketing talent, and she could join the company after graduating. Back then, even her choice of major revolved around this family. Now she'd switched to accounting, because accounting was for herself. Mom was changing too. She started noticing details she'd never paid attention to before. For instance, she finally realized that Chin Mukshui's closet was stuffed to bursting department store labels, designer collaborations, limited editions, while my closet was filled with budget finds I'd bought online. The most expensive being a 300 yuan down jacket. Mom stood in front of my closet for a long time. The next day, she left 5 new outfits on my bed. Good brands, right sizes. When I came back and saw them, I carried them to the hallway outside her bedroom door. I don't ask why I didn't want them. I don't like the styles. What styles do you like? I'll get more. It's fine. Just transfer the money. I'll buy my own. Mom stood in the hallway and her eyes suddenly went red. She finally understood. The old Yan Huey never said, I don't like it, because she was afraid of upsetting Mom. Whatever she was given, she accepted. Even if it didn't fit. Even if it wasn't to her taste, she'd wear it. She'd treated that humble gratitude as love. The new Yan Huey didn't need to be humble anymore. Don't like it means don't like it. No more forcing herself into an ill-fitting outfit just for a scrap of attention. Before winter break, my school held a parent and teacher conference. The homeroom teacher called the house and said a parent needed to attend. Mom took the call. She agreed and carefully marked it on the calendar. But the date happened to fall on the same day as Ki-S in Mukshu's year, Tin En piano recital. She was torn. Chinling volunteered. I'll go. I'll attend the parent and teacher conference. He showed up in a suit, sat in the classroom for 90 minutes. Listened to the teacher read through the class rankings. Lu Yanhue third in her year. He saw my grades. He looked at the textbooks stacked neatly on my desk. Each spine had a labeled tab, the handwriting small and precise. After the conference, the homeroom teacher pulled him aside. Lu Yanhue is the most disciplined student I've ever taught. But she doesn't seem to have any friends. She doesn't talk to classmates during breaks. Please give her more attention at home. Jinling sat in that classroom, suddenly unable to speak. He drove to pick me up. On the road, he said, you placed third in your year. That's impressive. What do you want as a reward? Can the tuition budget be increased next semester? I want to sign up for a CPA prep course. CPA? You're only a freshman. The sooner I study, the sooner I pass, the sooner I can start working. King Ling was quiet for a while. What's the rush to work? It's not like the family needs your money. I said nothing. Because I was saving. I was preparing to leave. Every UN I'd asked for, the major I'd chosen, every grade I'd worked for, none of it was about fitting into this family. It was about the day I'd had the ability to walk out of it. Jen Zan, the Lunar New Year arrived. This was my second spring festival with the Qin family. Last year, having just been brought home, the family had posed for a group photo as a token gesture. Back then, King Yuanshan and Lin Ji sat in the center. Qing Mukshue stood beside Mom. Qing Ling stood beside Dad. I stood at the very edge. This year, Qin Ling suggested retaking the family photo. This time, he deliberately pulled me to the center. Yanhui in the middle, Mom and Dad on either side. Qin Mukshu's smile froze for 1 second, but she recovered quickly, her voice sweet as ever. Yes, Jeiji is the biological daughter. She should stand in the middle. There was a barb in that sweetness. The words biological daughter were a reminder to everyone that she was not. Whenever she said things like that, Mom and Dad would feel sorry for her and think I was taking her place. In the past, this trick worked every time. But this time, Mom and Dad said nothing. On New Year's Eve, Mom handed out gifts. She'd prepared the same gift for me and Kin Ruksho. A necklace she'd had custom. She'd had custom made well in advance. I took it, glanced at it, and immediately lost interest. I muttered under my breath, why not just give cash? What am I supposed to do with this? Mom's hands began to tremble. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. I glanced up, unsure what was wrong. Was she sick? But Mukshu was here. That was enough people to look after her. I tossed the necklace on the table, turned, and went back to my room. Qin Mukshu had finally panicked, completely. She realized that no matter what she did, performing, playing, the victim, my presence in the Kinch household was growing stronger, and her privileges were being stripped away, bit by bit. So she played her worst hand yet. On the third day of the new year, several important guests came to the house. While everyone was sitting in the living room chatting over tea, Ching Mukshu suddenly let out a cry from upstairs. Then she came rushing down, eyes red. "Mom, my bracelet is gone." It was a limited, 10 edition Swarovski crystal bracelet Dad had given her for her birthday last year. Only 50 in the world. Her name was engraved on the clasp. "How can it be gone?" Mom frowned. "I've searched my entire room. I can't find it anywhere." Chin Mukshu bit her lip, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Daddy bought it just for me." As she cried, her gaze kept drifting, ever so casually, in my direction. "Gigi," she began timidly, "did you go into my room yesterday?" The living room fell silent. The guests glanced at each other. She'd used similar tactics before. Back then, I was a prickly hedgehog trying to fit in, and when I was falsely accused, I'd erupt, screaming, raging, desperately trying to prove my innocence. The result was always the same. I humiliated myself in front of the guests, while she earned everyone's sympathy by being the delicate wronged one. But this time I didn't lose my temper. I leaned back on the sofa and sipped my water. "No, but I definitely saw you standing at my door yesterday." "And?" I set down the glass. "So you're saying I stole your bracelet?" Hyun. Muksu hadn't expected me to be this direct. She froze, then quickly shook her head. "No, that's not what I meant. You just want to search my room, right?" I stood up. "Let's go." I led the way upstairs. Chi and Muxie stood rooted in place. Mom, Dad, and Chi and Ling were frozen too. "Aren't you looking for a bracelet?" I stopped on the stairs and looked down at them. "My room isn't locked. Search all you want." King Yinchen's face darkened. "Yan Yue, your sister didn't mean it like that." "I do mean it like that," I interrupted. "If we don't settle this today, it'll hang over everything." I walked into my room, pulled open drawers, opened the closet. "Go ahead." Chin Mukshu reluctantly stepped in, made a show of rifling through the drawers and closet, then bent down to feel around my backpack. Her hand paused at the bottom. Then she pulled out the crystal bracelet. "GAI." She held the bracelet, staring at me with a look of disbelief, tears instantly spilling. "If you liked it, you could have just asked. Why did you have to steal it?" The guests in the living room were whispering. Dad's face was flushed crimson. "Enough!" Qin Yuanshan slammed his hand on the table. "Yan Hui, what do you have to say for yourself?" Mom looked at me with undisguised disappointment. "Yan Hui, how could you do something like this?" Jinling stood in the doorway, lips pressed tight, saying nothing. His eyes held something indescribable, like disappointment mixed with anguish. Everyone was looking at me the same way. Disappointment. Disgust. Incomprehension. The old me would have shattered in this moment, would have sobbed, begged them to believe me, dropped to my knees to prove I hadn't stolen anything. But now, I simply took my phone from my pocket. "Would you like to see the truth?" I opened an app. On the screen, surveillance, footage of my room. From 3 a.m. that morning. A figure in pajamas pushed open my bedroom door. She crept inside, opened my backpack, slipped a bracelet into the bottom, then tiptoed back out and closed the door behind her. The figure was Kin Muksu. After coming back to the Qing house, I'd installed a tiny camera in my room. Not to spy on anyone, to document. In case I ever needed evidence, I didn't want to be framed again with nothing to show for it. The footage was cast onto the big screen in the living room. Everyone saw it. Jane Muxoa's face went chalk white. I. She stumbled backward, voice shaking. That's not me. 3 a.m. wearing your pink pajamas. Your other bracelet on your left wrist, I said calmly. Want me to zoom in on your face? King Muxue collapsed completely. Yes, I put it there, she screamed, tears and elaborate makeup smearing across her face. I wanted to get rid of her. I don't want her in this house. Kinyo, Chinyo. Huangshan walked over and slapped her hard across the face. King Muxue crumpled to the floor, but she was still screaming through hysterical sobs. Why? I've been here for 18 years. I worked so hard to make you love me. What gives her the right to come back and have everything? Your heart's all turned to her, then what am I? She sat on the floor like someone unhinged, crying and laughing at the same time. This was the first time in 18 years she dropped the perfect mask. Vicious, selfish, ugly. Her parents stared at her as though looking at a complete stranger. King Ling closed his eyes and turned away in pain. And I remained calm throughout. No vindication. No gloating over a fallen idol. I was watching a spectacle and I'd seen enough. I found it a bit boring, honestly. Since things are cleared up, I shouldered my backpack. I should go. I ignored the stunned stares in the living room and walked straight to the entryway. Behind me came a scramble of footsteps. Qinling caught up and blocked the doorway. Yan Hui, where? Where are you going? His voice carried a tremor he couldn't hide. Anywhere. I don't want to stay here anymore. I looked at him calmly. But everything's been cleared up. He looked at me almost pleadingly. Muxue was wrong. Mom and Dad will deal with her. You don't have to go. Qinling. I looked at him the way you'd look at a stranger. Things being cleared up only means I didn't steal anything. It doesn't mean I want to stay. He looked as though he'd been nailed to the floor. His lips trembled, but no words came. Yan Hui. Mom stumbled toward me, reaching for my wrist. I sidestepped. Her hand grasped at air, hanging frozen. Ungrasped. Please don't go. Mommy knows she was wrong. Mommy will make it up to you, I promise. Tears streamed down her face. That won't be necessary. I tightened the straps of my backpack. I moved past them and pushed open the front door. In the living room, Qin Yuanshen stood paralyzed, watching Muxue sitting on the floor in hysterics, then turning to watch my retreating figure descending the stairs. His mouth opened and closed, as though he wanted to call my name, but in the end, no sound came out. The door closed behind me. The air outside was cold, but it was clean. Jian. In the first month after I left the Qin house, Qinling came to my school once. He waited downstairs from my dorm for 3 hours, holding a box of pastries I'd mentioned wanting to try once. My roommate spotted him from the window and asked if I wanted to go down. I said, "No thanks, I don't know him." He came a few more times after that. He never saw me. More than half a year later, I heard through a former classmate that Qin Muxue had been sent away. I also heard that Mrs. Lin had developed chronic insomnia and her health was deteriorating. She'd even collapsed at home several times, and that Qing Yuanshan's hair had gone mostly white. None of it stirred anything in me. Those were other people's affairs now. I was busy preparing for the CPA exam, busy with my internship at an accounting firm. I used the money I'd saved during my time at the Tinuals to pay rent. Now, with income from the internship, I was completely self-sufficient. After that wire, strung tight for 19 years, finally snapped, I discovered that life could be remarkably simple. 2 years later, I was a junior. One afternoon, I'd just gotten back from the accounting firm when I spotted Qinling downstairs. He'd lost a lot of weight. His back looked slightly hunched. He stood at the windy corner in his overcoat, smoking. When he saw me, he put out the cigarette. Yankui. He walked over, his voice badly hoarse. What do you need? He looked at me, his eyes holding a clumsy kind of hope. Yanhui, I don't know how to get you to come back. He rubbed his hands together nervously, like a child who'd done something wrong. But Mom is really sick. She can't sleep at all. She keeps calling your name. I frowned. How much money do you need? Chengling recoiled as if struck. It's not money. I don't want money. Oh, I said. Then there's nothing I can do. I kept walking. Behind me, I heard him call out, I regret running past you that day. Every single day I regret it. The wind in the corridor blew my hair across my face, but I never turned to look at the figure trembling in the cold behind me. Jian Jian Jian. I live alone in this brand new city. Every morning I wake up early to study vocabulary. I take the subway to the accounting firm. In the evening, I come home and cook myself a bowl of noodles. On weekends, I go to the library. Sometimes I stop by the flower shop on the corner and buy a cheap bunch of daisies. I don't feel lonely. I just feel free. Because I finally no longer need their love. Unquote.